Hi everybody, I'm Skip Elsheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show. Now with no Facebook presence. I don't know. I don't think Facebook's gonna invite me back. They're done. What took me down? Was it that 16mm film Hot Ice that took down the YouTube stream? Maybe that's it. It was a hockey game from the 50s is what brought down the AV Geeks empire on Facebook. So I kind of wish it was something more interesting and something more in my wheelhouse, but whatever. There you go. Yeah, so we watch old 16mm films as we microwave our dinners for lunch, or our lunches. And then you just heard somebody's microwave dinging. Let's learn about your thrift habits. Enjoy.
Okay, I give up.
Oh, did I disturb you, Dad? I was just looking at this new camera.
Camera?
Yeah, only $40.
Well, buy it. You've got a steady allowance and a good part-time job.
You kidding?
Month I financed your new baseball mitt. $8. So far you haven't paid it back. Tony, maybe there's something wrong with the way you're handling money.
Here comes the lecture.
Advice, no lecture. I've got money problems, too. Take a look at our family budget. But we all have to make ends meet. And in order to make ends meet, we have to practice some thrift habits. Your grandfather once told me that thrift is the absence of waste. Maybe you don't actually waste money, but sometimes you are careless with it. For example, remember those green canvas shoes you bought? Did you really need them, or were you spending your money foolishly on a new fad? And those records you bought? You couldn't make up your mind between two favorites and bought both. And that transistor radio. Without a protective leather case, it cost $3.50 less. A real bargain. It would have been cheaper, really, to have spent the extra money for the leather case. Good thrift habits help prevent that kind of carelessness with money.
Yeah, but how?
Well, one good thrift habit is getting money matters down on paper. I'll show you what I mean. Now, we'll start with your goals, the things you want to buy. We'll call this Tony's Money Goals. I'll list your short-range goals, you know, the things you want to buy soon, and your long-range goals, the more expensive. What are your short-range money goals?
Well, I'll need $5 for Mother's birthday and $3.50 for the new baseball book. Oh, yes, the baseball mitts. Baseball mitts, $8.
All right, what are your long-range goals?
The camera.
Sure.
Camera, $40.
Okay, now, there are your goals. Can you afford them?
Well, maybe. I get $2 a week allowance. My paper route gives me $2.75 a week.
So your total, or fixed income, comes to $4.75 a week.
But I need money for school supplies and magazines and movies and milk for lunch and...
Okay, you're talking about expenses. Now, there are two kinds of expenses. fixed expenses, which are part of your daily life, and they don't change very much, and flexible expenses. All money that's used for what we might call luxuries. Now, let's draw another diagram that'll help you keep track of your expenses. Now, on it, you'll list your fixed and flexible expenses over the next 4 weeks. For the next 4 weeks, Tony was very careful, keeping up his expense record. It was a good expense record, and I told him so. Well, this is fine, Tony. Just fine. Have any trouble keeping it up to date?
Well, not after I got into the habit of doing it.
Good. Let's see, your fixed expenses were milk, 50 cents, church contributions, 30 cents, and a haircut, $1.75.
Our haircut's a fixed expense?
Well, anything you need to spend money on regularly is a fixed expense. All right, let's look at flexible expenses. School supplies, snacks, magazines, model kits, game tickets, and movies. And here are your total expenses for each week. Hey, you stayed within your income all the time.
Yeah, and I save more than $7. You know, when you write down every expense, it makes you more careful about how you spend your money.
Well, you've started a good thrift habit. But if you're going to reach your money goals, you need to save more of your income. To do that, you're going to have to learn to choose between certain flexible expenses, the luxuries. For example, will it be a magazine this week? Or a super deluxe Sunday? Will you buy a model to add to your collection? Or would you rather go to a movie? By keeping flexible expenses to a minimum, you save more for your goals. Understand?
Sure. But now that I'm watching my expenses, I guess I can afford some of the things I want.
Well, it'd be better to get into the habit of using a system to save for your goals.
Another system?
Using a system is the best way to handle money with any success. Now, how about another chart to help you keep track of your savings?
Another chart?
Well, give it a try anyway. This column lists your goals, short range and long range. This column shows how much they cost. This column will show what you should save each week to reach a goal. Mother's gift, for example. A mother's birthday is May 15th. How many weeks to May 15th?
Just a second. 2, 3, 4 weeks.
All right. Dividing the cost of the gift, $5, by the number of weeks, 4, our answer is $1.25.
Yeah, I see. I've got to save $1.25 a week. And the baseball book. I'd like that before the big series. 8 weeks from now.
All right. Well, that's 44 cents a week. And you'll need about 50 cents a week for the mitt.
Hey, Dad, don't forget the camera. I want it for when school begins next semester.
Okay.
That's 16 weeks.
16 weeks.
Let's see, that would
40.
be...
That's $2.50 a week. $2.50. All right, now, after deducting expenses each week, list the amount left over here, and then you can apply certain amounts to your goals. If you want to reach those goals, you'll have to save $4.69 a week. But with your expenses, I'm afraid you can't manage it.
But if I watch my flexible expenses and drop one of my goals, that'll help balance things.
That's the idea. You could even postpone getting your camera for a while and save for it a little longer. I know. It's a hard decision to make.
All these thrift habits are hard.
Sure. But thrift habits help you save to get what you want. And you're learning to stand on your own financially.
Thanks for the help, Dad. Good night.
Anytime, Tony. Well, it seemed Tony had made a good start. I knew, though, that sometimes he'd slip out of his thrift habits by buying things he really didn't want or need. We all do. But most of the time, he would remember the thrift habits he'd learned, keeping track of his income and expenses. Deciding on money goals, whether short range, such as Mother's birthday gift, or long range, such as an expensive camera. And saving for these goals week by week until he could pay for them. These are some of the basic thrift habits. As you can see, they worked for Tony, and they'll work for you, too.
So he bought a pistol? I was not expecting that. So anyways, somebody mentioned in the comments that they had seen this before, but with a different cast. Man, Cornette used to do that all the time. They would just reuse the script and update it just a little bit, and the hairstyles and the clothing and all that stuff. Now, the narrator in this, or the dad in this, I think, is the narrator that's in this film, which I've shown before, but it's been a while, so enjoy, quote unquote.
Today, but it's not surprising. He doesn't seem to care about anything. He didn't even thank his parents when they gave me to him. I guess I'll have to help him really see all that his parents do. Abracadabra. They won't see you. You'll be invisible through and through.
Hi, Mom. Hey, are we having eggs? Hey, Mom, what's wrong?
You're invisible, Jimmy.
What? Who said that?
I did, Jimmy. Me, down here.
Invisible? Wow! But I don't want to be invisible. Hey, Mom!
She can't see you or hear you. I made you invisible so you can discover something.
What?
That's for you to find out. When you've learned it, you'll be visible again.
Learned what?
I'll give you a hint. You can find out by watching your mom and dad.
Hey, wait. I want to talk to you. Just watch your mom and dad.
First, he watched his mother and began to see all the things she does for the family. He never really noticed that before. Jimmy could see that his dad also did a lot of things around the house, for Jimmy and for the family. Then Jimmy remembered that besides all the things Dad does at home for the family, he also has a job. At work, he earns money so the family can buy food and clothes and all the other things the family needs. Then Jimmy remembered that many of his friends have mothers who also work at a job during the day.
Here's your shirt. I sewed the button on it.
Thank you, hon.
Thank you for putting up the shelves. Lunch will be ready pretty soon.
Okay, I'll be down in a minute.
For the first time, Jimmy was really seeing how many things his mom and dad do to help the family. But how could he show his parents how he appreciated them? What could he do?
Hi, Jimmy. Lunch is ready. Will you call your dad, please?
Sure, Mom, just a second. Hey, I'm visible again. Mom can hear me. I must have learned something.
What'd you learn, Jimmy?
Well, I just watched Mom and Dad, and I saw that they do a lot of things. They make my meals, and take care of me, and fix things for me, and help me. They're nice.
That's right. But that's not why I made you visible again.
But
You learned something better, Jimmy.
I did?
Remember when you didn't bother your dad when he was busy? Or when you swept up the sawdust? That's when you showed that you really appreciated your mom and dad. That's when you really learned.
Thanks.
Your parents like to know you appreciate them. You can probably think of some other ways to let your parents know you do.
Jimmy?
Okay, Mom, coming. Dad, lunch is ready.
Okay, Jim. I'll be up in a minute.
Thanks for the puppet.
You're welcome, son.
I was hoping to get a narration credit there, so we could figure out if the dad who was in the previous film, because I think it's the same guy, right? The dad from Thrift Habits is the same guy that narrated this, probably one of the scariest films in my collection. This film is really, really outrageous for so many reasons. And the thing is, like, I wrote an article about this for a journal. Like this, no, actually it was for a book. But the whole idea that you'd show this to kids, like, what are kids going to remember? Like, is it to be respective of your parents and to understand all the work that they do? Or is it the fact that you have this scary puppet that can potentially make you invisible? I tend to think it's going to be the latter. That's what I would have latched onto as a kid. But, man, woo! All right, so behind me I have a scanner. And we have a film set up. No easy answers. A lot of hard questions, no easy answers. Enjoy. Rewind it. I'm sorry. Here's your friend the doctor. And then I'll rewind this and then, yeah. All right. Here, enjoy.
This is Dr. Evans, and we're in Dr. Evans' office. Like most doctors, he does his work partly in his office, and sometimes at a hospital, and sometimes his work takes him into people's homes. Now we're at Washington School. We won't find Dr. Evans here, but we will begin to find out what he does, what your doctor does. Now we're in the hall outside the health room. Let's go in with this boy. This is Jimmy, a new boy in school. This is Miss Burns, the health nurse. Since Jimmy is new in this school, she has a letter for him to take home. That's an important-looking letter, Jimmy thinks. When he gets home, his mother can tell him about it. Now it's after school. Jimmy is hurrying home to give the letter to his mother. Jimmy can't wait to find out what the letter says. Have you ever brought a home from school? What do you think this is about? It's a letter about the health program at Washington School. What's the idea of this health program? Well, it's to make sure the boys and girls have enough play and exercise and learn how to keep well and strong and have first aid when they are hurt or sick. You can see that the health program is a very important part of school. And here's something more from Miss Burns. A card. Well, Father will want to see all this. Jimmy can go out to play now, and tonight after supper, they'll all talk about this some more with Father. Now it's after supper. Jimmy wants to find out more, and so does his sister. Now we'll learn about the card Miss Burns wants them to fill out. What should go on the card? Let's see. There's Jimmy's name, Jimmy Maxon, and a place for his parents' name, address, and phone, and his doctor's name, address, and phone. Jimmy wonders, who is the doctor they'll go to? Jimmy's family is new in town, but his mother and father have already chosen a new doctor, and his name is Albert V. Evans, M.D., Dr. Evans. Mother has already made a date for Jimmy to see Dr. Evans, because Jimmy should have a health exam. That is a part of the school's health program. What is this health exam? What will the doctor do, Jimmy's sister wants to know. Jimmy has had health exams before from where he used to live. Dr. Evans, the same things. He will examine inside Jimmy as well as outside. He'll listen at Jimmy's chest. He'll look inside his mouth and throat, inside his ears, to find out if Jimmy is well and strong. Next day, here's Jimmy at the health room again. He has the card all filled out now. But Miss Burns is busy with Howard, one of Jimmy's new friends. He fell on the stairs and hurt his shoulder and his chin. So Miss Burns will phone Howard's mother and let her know. Look at that. Miss Burns has the phone number written down on Howard's card. That makes it easy to call, doesn't it? What about Jimmy's mother's phone number? Yes, it's written on his card. But Howard's mother doesn't answer the phone. She isn't home. So Miss Burns will phone Howard's doctor. It's a good thing she has the doctor's number, too, isn't it? And when Miss Burns tells the doctor about Howard, he says to bring Howard to his office soon. Well, having a doctor and knowing his name and address can be very important, can't it? And Jimmy says Dr. Evans' address and phone number over and over to himself to know them well. Now it's the day Jimmy is supposed to go see his doctor. Jimmy and his mother find the doctor's office very easily. Jimmy's father made a little map showing how to get there. And Jimmy had lots of fun trying to follow the map. Now we're in the waiting room. Mother tells the nurse who they are. And look here, Jimmy's time to see Dr. Evans, 3:30. And it's almost 3:30 now. Jimmy and his mother will wait until the doctor can see them. Jimmy is glad to have a chance to look around him. My, the doctors help many people, don't they? What does Jimmy see? It's Howard. He's been to see another doctor in this office. Jimmy wants to know if Howard is all right. Howard says he's fine, just fine. Your doctor can surely help when you're not well. And here's someone else. It's Anne, another of Jimmy's new friends. She has been to see Dr. Evans. Jimmy wonders why. But before he has a chance to ask, it's time for him to meet Dr. Evans. The first thing Jimmy wants to know is this. Is Anne sick? Anne is just fine. We take good care of her, the doctor says. Isn't it good to have a doctor who can help you? Jimmy thinks Dr. Evans is going to be pretty nice. The doctor begins by asking Jimmy and his mother a lot of questions. All about times when Jimmy has been sick, and about what shots he has had. All sorts of questions. You see, keeping Jimmy strong and well is an important job. And Dr. Evans will need to know a lot about Jimmy. So what has happened to Jimmy before is part of what he needs to know. And another part comes from looking Jimmy over very carefully. The doctor looks into Jimmy's ears and eyes and throat, just the way Mother told about it. And a little later, sometimes having a health exam can be lots of fun. Dr. Evans listens to Jimmy's heart. He hears it going... And when Dr. Evans has found out many things about Jimmy's health, he talks about what Jimmy should do to keep well. He suggests some ideas for eating and rest and exercise. He'll send a report on Jimmy's health to the school if Mother agrees. And he thinks Jimmy should have some booster shots. Do you know what that means? Well, let's see. We'll need the nurse's help. Dr. Evans says that shots are very important to help keep Jimmy well and strong. These shots will help to keep him from catching certain diseases, diphtheria, whooping cough, and so on. Dr. Evans gets some medicine ready, while the nurse cleans and sterilizes a small spot on Jimmy's arm. And Dr. Evans puts the medicine under Jimmy's skin. Jimmy has had quite a few shots, starting when he was a baby. And now he's glad to have his booster shot. In fact, he'll do just what Dr. Evans says he should. Because Jimmy thinks his doctor is his friend, and he begins to remember things the doctors do. They work with nurses and parents and teachers to help keep children well. And they help people when they are sick or hurt. They tell people how to keep well. And they examine people to find out how well and strong they are. Now we know how helpful Dr. Evans can be to Jimmy. Do you know how helpful your friend, the doctor, can be to you?
We used to glorify science for making progress possible. All our conveniences come from the application of scientific knowledge. But now we sometimes condemn science for our failure to use that knowledge wisely.
Science just makes wars worse. It doesn't help them, it doesn't stop them. It just makes them worse. And I think I'm going to study humanities and religion because that's where the answer really is. And we can't hope to stop wars by science, but only through religion and humanities.
Here we are spending billions of dollars sending man up to the moon. But yet here on Earth, people are living in poverty. The housing around here is just ridiculous.
It isn't surprising that science is blamed for the world's ills. Scientists have done what once seemed impossible. So we tend to think they can find an answer to every problem. Like controlling insects, which destroy a third of the world's food crop, and spread diseases like malaria, which these mosquito larvae can transmit when they mature. We once believed chemicals like DDT were the answer. But we soon discovered that insects quickly develop a resistance to chemicals. Now, DDT hardly affects mosquitoes at all. But insecticides do affect other living things. Computers are helping identify effective insecticides that have fewer side effects. Computers now touch almost everything in our lives, from keeping track of school records, all the way to scheduling airline flights and landing airplanes completely automatically, without any help from the pilots.
Yeah, computers, I think I can appreciate computers as much as anybody else. In fact, that's why I've got this unemployment check on time today. The computer system also put myself and about 50 other people out of work on the assembly line at the company I worked for.
Without computers to keep track of the paperwork our society generates, the whole economy would falter. Computer networks can store vital information about millions of people. But what about the risk of computer mistakes? And how can we prevent others from using memory banks to discover more about us than we want them to know? Computer analysis has helped geneticists unlock some of the very secrets of life, indicating in advance whether children will be born healthy or deformed. They do it by culturing cells from unborn human embryos and then counting under a microscope whether all 46 normal chromosomes are present. This way, couples can know their chances of delivering healthy children in advance, sometimes even before conception. Some of the long-term implications have been considered by Dr. Arthur Robinson.
We're now in the midst of new discoveries which may give man the power to control his own evolution. That power is undoubtedly many years in the future. However, already we have the ability to control the birth of individuals with serious defects.
Eventually, chromosomes may be engineered like building blocks to produce perfect babies. But who is to decide what's perfect? And how will we prevent birth defects and yet not violate the rights and privacy of prospective parents? Freedom of personal choice is also a concern of biofeedback and behavior modification researchers. Newly perfected instruments can chart the rhythms of the brain. When the readings are displayed, subjects can learn to alter those rhythms consciously.
When people are under pressure, the brain signals the muscles to contract. If the muscles stay contracted for too long a time, like say in the head area, then you may develop a tension headache. And these biofeedback instruments that we have here we can use to teach people the art of relaxation.
Using related techniques, scientists can already greatly modify human behavior and actually can control the behavior of rats. If human behavior can be manipulated that way, who will decide who must be controlled? And who will do the controlling? Because the world is interconnected, often in ways we don't fully understand, everything eventually has an impact on everything else, be it computers, insect control, genetics, behavior modification, or the weather, which controls how well crops grow. And it's the weather that affects our travel and sometimes safety. Extreme weather is directly responsible for an average of 500 deaths and over $2 billion worth of property damage in the United States every year. Because it is so important, man has tried since the earliest times to control the weather. Meteorologists now can modify some kinds of weather and hope to control even more. The question about the weather and about many other areas where scientists are working is this: how much should they control? For example, when a hurricane strikes, it can cause enormous damage. Research has been conducted to steer these storms away from population centers. But if a way to direct hurricanes is perfected, who would decide that it's better to steer away from one city and let it hit somewhere else? In effect, it's a question of who owns and controls the weather. In a part of Colorado known as Hale Alley, farmers have long endured damage from the weather.
I'll cite you one case back in 1948. We had 7 hailstorms through here. We harvested less than 10% of a normal crop.
It came through here, and it completely wiped out everything. That year, my folks had nothing. It just killed chickens just like if you went out there and shot them with a .22 rifle. Now, when you get something like that, now that's a heavy loss.
The National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, has been experimenting with methods to suppress the hail that devastates this region. The most promising technique is to seed potential hailstorm clouds from airplanes. Silver iodide particles from the burning flares are carried up into the clouds, where they react with supercooled water.
We think that the particles will produce small hailstones like these that do no damage, instead of big ones like this that can wipe out a wheat field in a few minutes. Because we're concerned about the effects that weather modification may have throughout an area, we've been very careful to consult with the people who live up here in northeastern Colorado, where we're conducting an experiment to see if we can suppress damaging hail.
The farmers and ranchers most affected by the experiment are not in total agreement.
I would be willing to pay, I believe, maybe a 10% gross crop production premium for hail suppression.
Until it was proven that they could suppress hail, that I think it ought to be a research financed by the government.
Well, I'm not in favor of it because In the first place, I'm not sure that nature should be tampered with to that extent. In the second place, I'm not sure that it's, at least for areas like this, it's not economically a good thing if it works.
But I would assume that they'd have to prove to us that they could suppress hail, say, from 75 to 90% every year. Then I think we could rely on it.
This thing would have to be controlled, you know, so it would benefit the general country.
If, say, we'd get 2 or 3 inches less rain in a year, even though we didn't get any hail with it, that could mean a fellow in my position would be running maybe 100 head less cows, which could, for all practical purposes, put you out of business.
I introduced the bill in the Colorado legislature because of problems we had had in the local area of Colorado where I live. The state must protect people from things that might happen, and therefore we do need all these safeguards that we have built into our law. Can we know for sure what changes in the environment will result from modifying the weather?
Scientists have been feeding data into the biggest computers available for almost 25 years, but they still can't reliably predict what will happen a week in advance because the physical problems are so complicated. So if we can't even be sure if it's going to rain next Tuesday, how can we be sure what will happen when we alter natural weather events?
For example, farmers profit from heavy snowfalls because deep mountain snowpacks produce abundant runoff in the spring. But elk can starve if drifts cover their normal forage. Some wildflowers may fail to develop seeds if the snow melts unusually late. No one knows the effect this will have on small animals, or more importantly, on the total environment. Interactions between the machinery of civilization and the environment extend far beyond the weather. As man learns to control the most powerful natural forces, such as atomic energy, the risks, as well as the benefits, become greater. So scientists have the responsibility to predict and explain the future impact of their discoveries. And we all have the responsibility to pay attention so we can make intelligent decisions. In our complex and interconnected world, about the only thing we know for sure is that there will be no easy answers.
And what's interesting is there's a lot of films that came out around this time that take advantage of that soundtrack. Not the exact soundtrack, but the instrumentations and the scary kind of electronic thing that was also kind of going on at that same time. And a lot of them are on the verge of being scared about the future. So there's a documentary based on the book Future Shock by Alvin Toffler, and Gil Mill was the electronic composer, and it has that same type of, like, the future is great, but we can't keep up with it, and what's going to happen? And so it has that kind of same type of scary soundtrack. Gil Mill actually reached out to me at one point, this is probably like 15, oh no, almost 20 years ago, I think, and he was looking for a more complete cut of Future Shock than what was being distributed, and so. But he also did the soundtrack for Andromeda Strain, so big fan. And then a bunch of other stuff. Like, I think he did some TV, maybe some Columbo episodes. I'm not sure. Anywho, let's see. Talking about monkeying with ecosystems brings to mind Australia, where It's like, we're having problems with this, so we'll bring this. Oh, now we're having a problem with this because there's no natural predators. Oh, well, then we'll do this. And like, what are we going to do with all the poop that's built up? Well, we have to bring in dung beetles now. So here's Australia, land and people. Enjoy.
Do you know what the Australian people are like? Do you know what kind of country Australia is? These are questions we can answer by seeing Australia, by getting acquainted with the Australian people, by comparing the way things look in Australia with scenes in our country, and by studying Australia on the map. Just where is Australia? For the answer, let's start with the United States. To reach Australia, we could go west to Hawaii, then on across the Great Pacific to Australia. Or we could go east to Europe, across the Middle East, and on across the Indian Ocean to Australia. Either route we take, we go far south of the equator, into the southern hemisphere. Do you see now why Australia is called the land down under? Now let's make a closer comparison with the United States. In our country, we go south to the warm lands near the equator. In Australia, one goes north to the warm regions near the equator. The warmest city in Australia is Darwin, in the north. Just as Miami is one of the warmest cities in southern United States. Yes, in the land down under, the climate is the reverse of ours. The cooler lands are in the south, the hotter lands are in the north. What do you think grows in the hot regions of the north? There are tropical forests. Great trees and thick jungle-like growth remind us of the tropical forests of other hot, wet lands near the equator. Fields of sugarcane are another sight we associate with hot, wet lands. Sugarcane grows well in the coastlands of northern and eastern Australia. What would you expect to find in the more temperate lands of the south? Of course, scenes like this. A dairy farm in the temperate lowlands of New South Wales, or an apple orchard that reminds us of those in the northwest part of the United States. Here in Australia, apples are ripe in March, another reminder that the seasons are in reverse of ours in the land down under. The land down under is far from most other lands. In round numbers, it is 4,000 miles to Africa, 10,000 miles to England, 2,000 miles to China, 7,000 miles to the United States. Surrounded by vast oceans, the Australians use ships, large ocean-going ships, to reach and trade with other lands. There are many fine harbors, like this one at Sydney, with its famous bridge, that are centers of ship traffic. Yes, Australia depends upon ships that are lifelines to the ports of other lands, ports such as Hong Kong in Southeast Asia, Dunkirk in France, London in England, and New York in the United States. Growing in importance are the great transoceanic plains that span the seas to all parts of the world. Australians are air-minded and depend on planes for much of their overseas travel. They were pioneers of air travel across the Pacific. So when we say Australia is the land down under, let's remember that Australia is far from the United States and from Europe. Australia is below the equator. The hotter lands are north The cooler lands are south. Now about the second question we asked. What kind of a country is Australia? Look at the vast stretches of rolling grasslands, the great plains of this country. Look at a country so open and empty that a railroad track can cut across 800 miles of it in almost a straight line. Yes, look at Australia's mountains, and remember this: it's a big country. Australia is almost as large as the United States, but there are differences. About 170 million people live in the United States. Now think of 10 million. That's about the total population of Australia. And that's our second key idea. Australia is an entire continent with a small population. There are places where one man may own several thousand square miles of land. There are places so remote that doctors make their calls by plane, part of the flying doctor service in this spacious land. Yet there are places where population is dense. About 1.5 million people live in the city of Melbourne. Sydney has a population of about 2 million people. How is the population distributed? We know that the more temperate lands are in the south. More than 90% of the people live in the southern half of the continent. Here is the main reason: rainfall. The southeast trade winds bring yearly rainfall to the southeast coast. The westerly winds bring rain during the winter to the southern coast. Inland is a vast desert with scant rainfall. Where do you think most of the people live? Of course, where the best land is. Cities such as Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane are in the most productive part of Australia. Much of the productive land of Australia is used for growing wheat. The size of this farm in New South Wales is 3,000 acres. The Australian wheat farmer harvests his wheat with a machine which he calls a header. The big tractors may have been made in England, in the United States, or in Australia. Harvest time is in summer, that is November and December, when we're having our winter. Wheat grows in regions that get 15 to 25 inches of rain a year. Australians pioneered dry farming in some regions where there is less moisture. Getting enough water for Australia's arid regions is a big problem. This is water that has been stored by Hume Dam, one of many irrigation and hydroelectric projects being built. The more water that can be stored in reservoirs, the more land Australians can irrigate and cultivate. Although Australia's climate is largely dry, sheep can be grazed in these vast areas. Remember scenes like this, scenes of Australia's biggest industry. Some of the largest sheep ranches in the world are here. Flocks are usually very large. Herders ride horseback and use dogs to help herd the sheep. The herders are called drovers. A ranch here is called a station, and each station is often a separate community, miles from the next station. The workmen, called sheep station hands, are directed by the owner. The workmen and their families live on the station. The family pet may often be a kelpie, a dog trained to herd sheep. On most sheep stations, we'll see the all-important pond for storing the water pumped from the well, or bore as it is called, and the sheds where thousands of sheep are shorn every year. Sheep are being shorn at one place or another in Australia during much of the year, beginning in September, which is springtime. Wool from Australian sheep is sold to many countries of the world. More than half of the world's fine wool is grown here. Because of their heavy wool, sheep cannot live in hot, moist regions. That means that the sheep-raising regions are not too close to the coasts, where rainfall is heavy, and they're not in the north, where it's too hot. However, cattle do well in the wet coastlands and the warmer lands of the north. Yes, the great open grasslands of Australia are fine for cattle. As in America, these lands have a history of pioneer settlement. Doesn't this remind you of the cattle and cowboys in the American West? In Australia, cowboys are called stockmen or drovers. Among the best stockmen in Australia are the dark-skinned natives, descendants of the original tribes who lived in Australia. Today, some of them work on the great cattle stations that are so common in Australia. We've seen lands where wheat, sugarcane, apples, and other crops are produced. We've seen grazing lands where sheep and cattle are raised. Yet the good farmlands are only 1/5 of the continent. The best grazing lands are about 1/3 of the continent. What about the rest of Australia? Much of it is like this, arid country that Australians call the outback. This open country is the home of the emu, a large Australian bird. Also associated with the outback is the kangaroo, a common animal in Australia. The most desolate parts of the outback are called the Never Never, a lonely land with few inhabitants. And farthest inland is the dead heart of Australia, the desert. But even the desert lands offer something. Men have found a wealth of minerals, and mining towns stand in the lonely plains. The town of Broken Hill is built around its rich mines. The lead, silver, and zinc mined here are part of Australia's mineral wealth. Among the minerals are uranium ores. Some uranium from Australia is sold to the United States. In developing their continent, Australians are building industries. The industrial city of Newcastle reminds us of the English mill town of the same name. Australians are working to increase their steel production. Yes, Australia has iron and coal, and there's a big job to be done in developing the resources of our whole continent. So let's remember this. Australia is an entire continent with a small population. And that brings us to our third question. What kind of people are the Australians? The first thing we might notice is that Australians are English-speaking people. Listen to the conversation of the men on the sheep station.
We got 5,000 head in our north paddock, and the feed's not very good. Maybe we better have a look. You blokes get your horses, we'll go and have a quick look-see.
Or listen to these women talking as they hang out clothes on the sheep station.
We won't know ourselves next Monday.
Why, Mum?
Dad's ordered a new washing machine that'll run on our plant. It's on its way up from Sydney.
Let's hear these Australian schoolboys discussing a new American book.
What you got there, Bob?
Let's see your book. It's a new one about jet planes.
About planes? Oh, boy, an American book. Ah, gee, look at this.
It's a beaut.
In a few moments, the boys will be in class listening to their teacher.
Well, now that we've traced the principal sea lanes between Australia and England, tell me, who can show us the principal airways? All right, Ralph.
Yes, Australians are English-speaking people. Not only their language, but their way of life is a heritage of the British Isles. English names and English flavor color many Australian cities. St. Paul's Cathedral in Melbourne reminds us of the similarities in English and Australian life. On the other hand, a beach scene like this reminds us of Americans on the sunny beaches of Florida or California. A fast game of rugby football on a Saturday afternoon isn't too different from a Saturday game of football in the United States, although rugby is an English game. Yes, Australians have things in common with both England and the United States. Like Americans, they are easygoing and democratic and have a pioneer history in a new land. So let's remember our basic idea. Australians are English-speaking people with a heritage of British culture. We've touched only 3 important concepts about Australia. Australia is the land down under, with seasons the reverse of ours. Australia is an entire continent with a small population. And Australians are English-speaking people with a heritage of British culture. But this is only the beginning. You can read and learn much more about Australia. Who is buying Australia's wheat and other farm products today? What are some of the problems of raising sheep in Australia? What about the vast arid lands of Australia? What is being done to reclaim land? What about rainfall and its effect on the way the land is used? How does trade and shipping relate Australia to the other nations of the world? What about Australia's population? How fast is it increasing? Australia is a young nation, and its people believe in a tremendous future for their great land, the big land down under.
Yeah, that was pretty great. I have some other films about Australia that are more contemporary. I have this, it looks like it's a safety film about, for meat packers, and it's based in Australia. Thanks for tuning in today. We have lots of films that we're digitizing and putting online on YouTube beyond just our streaming show. Some of the stuff that was from the Oregon Archive, but also some things that are related to some projects we're working on for different documentaries. So whenever we get a request for a film from our collection for stock footage, we'll rescan it and put it online, including a lot of stuff that we haven't put online before. So there's, if you're getting notifications, you'll see that there's probably, you'll get like 10 or so, and I apologize if that's annoying, but it's all for the greater glory. Just getting more information out there. Let's see. If you like what you saw, you can hit the thumbs up and the like button. Those are great ways to support us. The other thing you can do is hit the super thanks button. That's a way to donate. Or you can buy some coffee at ko-fi.com/avgeeks. Likewise, you can go to patreon.com/avgeeks. And actually watching the videos that we have online, there's advertising on there, which I know is super annoying. But that actually helps pay some bills as well. So, you know, enduring those ads helps. So thank you for that. Thanks for your eyeballs, as always. And we will see you again tomorrow. Please rewind, including devilish films. And we will see you tomorrow. Everybody take care.